Welcome to Koffee Talks with Dan Norton and David Person.
Dan, I don't want to give away today's topic too early before we actually start with our small talk, bantering baloney. But I think you and I both know that your life is filled with myriad secrets. Secrets that you don't want to divulge to anybody, you don't want to tell anybody about, you don't want them to find out about. You live your life in the throes, under the umbrella, under the guise of somebody who is saintly, and yet you're bound by all of these secrets. Secret relationships, secret discussions, secret information. You can't talk about anybody's name or this or that. Like, Dan, how do you live with yourself? I mean, how are you able to process that on a daily basis?
I mean, it's fine. If stuff is public, I'm fine talking about it and talking about names and stuff if stuff is made public. But if someone tells me something and asks me to keep it secret, I can.
Now, what about lore? If lore says to you, Dan, there's another guy in my life and I don't want you to tell anybody, it's a secret, are you going to keep that a secret?
No, I'll just leave. I'll just walk away.
You know what, Dan? The whole thing with you is you've always got it worked out. You'd be a professional, a great professional, like chess player. You're always 20 to 32 moves ahead of your competition.
I mean, that's fine. I'll take that. I'll be 20 moves ahead.
All right,
good place
fine.
to be.
Like to make the podcast 20 moves ahead of our competitors, which, by the way, we are moving in the right direction, even though nobody can understand if that's just bots or not. Dan, I want you to know, because I know you've never asked me personally, I like our podcast together, and I'm not just another bot. Does that help you?
That does help. That is good.
Okay, good. And Dan, will you promise to tell me the next time there's any kind of Pokemon Center drop so I don't miss out on every single valuable thing that could possibly come out because nobody ever tells me?
I missed as well. I was asleep. We missed out on this one as well.
Okay, which one did we miss this time, Dan?
So this is the upcoming black and white set, as we briefly touched on, but it's two different sets. English is dropping two sets at the same time. For the first time ever, there is the black set and the white set. I think it's Bolt, Flare, and something else, but it's two completely separate sets. If you buy the packs from the black set, you get the cards from that set. You buy the packs from the white set, you get the cards from that set. It's not like, we've had in the past where you have two different ETBs for the same set, but this is not. It's two completely separate sets.
And so is that what we missed? Did we miss some PC ETBs or something from one of those two sets?
Both of the sets, I think, dropped the Pokemon Center ETBs today. There was a lot of other stuff, I believe, dropped today as well, but the Pokemon Center ETBs will be the things that were exclusive to the Pokemon Center. Everything else should hit retail stores as normal.
Okay. Guys that are watching, gals that are watching, people that are watching that don't want to classify yourself as either a guy or a gal, because in this day and age, nobody wants to, and I don't blame you. Do whatever you want. Make yourself happy. I need one of each of these boxes, okay? Because that's what I do when I can't get a booster box of a This is a special set, right, Dan?
I believe so. There's so much announced for it. I believe that it's a special pair of sets. I don't think this is a regular booster box set.
Okay, so when I can't get a regular booster box something, I get a PC ETB of those things. So I have lots of stuff to trade. For those of you that happen to just get lucky in the drop today, please contact your local Uncle Dave and tell him, you know what, I would like to have a nice Worlds card in my collection, and I will find you something very special that's worth more than whatever the heck the boxes are going to go for, and we will do a nice trade, okay? So please keep that in mind. For Uncle Dan or Aunt Lore, don't do that as much because they don't have stuff to trade and they'll never part with anything from their collection because they love what they have and they will not let anybody get within 10 foot of it.
I mean, that's fine. We'll just pick up the promos individually because we don't care about the sealed stuff. So we'll probably try and get, the regular ETBs from our local store, and then we'll just buy the Pokemon Center promos.
And that's why, Dan, all the girls and guys call you easy, because what you just said there, Dan, is easy. And Uncle Dave's not quite so easy, and he never will be. So for those of you, that like to stalk me, the fans, Emily, you know who you are. Don't ever think I'll ever be easy. Dan, today I wanted to talk about something that was in my Instagram post. I actually posted it today. So I don't know if you'll see it tomorrow, the next day, a day before, the day after. My story goes away, but my post will still remain. But I posted today on some, what we like to call, Dan and I, the distributor promos. And when I mentioned secrets at the beginning of this podcast, these are cards that are pretty darn secretive. Like, not a lot of people know about these cards. And as time has worn on, and Dan will tell you the history of them, the story behind them, all of the controversy and lies, you can also see them Dateline Friday night at 10 p.m. on your local NBC affiliate. These cards are cards that really, there's kind of an aura, a mystique, and there aren't many of them that have ever surfaced. So Dan, can you clue us in, and then we'll make some comments about our endeavor and our knowledge about these cards.
Yeah, so initially to say what we're looking at is 3 cards. There's 2 from the Diamond and Pearl base set. That's a Turtwig and a Piplup, and 1 from Rising Rivals, which is a Munchlax. Each of them has a city name on it and a year. So Piplup is San Diego 07, Turtwig is New York 08, which makes Munchlax Chicago 09.
Yes.
So they are, the only variation on these cards are that they are stamped, because the Turtwig and the Piplup are Cosmos foil, but you could get Cosmos foil versions of these cards in special tins, and then the Munchlax, I believe, is non-foil, same as the one out the pack. It just has this special stamp on it. So initially, that's what we're looking at here. So the first kind of question about these when they first popped up, it was, I think, late 2010, early 2011, a picture of the Piplup was uploaded to Pokegym. It's quite a bad condition one, and the owner was asking about it, and the story that got passed around was that this was to do with Comic-Con. And even after the pictures of the other 2 showed up, for a long time it was believed that these were related to Comic-Con. It was known that they were very rare promos, but the story that got passed around was that they were given out to higher up vendors at Comic-Con events. I think the Comic-Con story may be passed around because of the locations of the 3 cards, San Diego, New York being 2 big Comic-Cons, and Chicago has other big conventions. Of course, San Diego Comic-Con being the biggest and most well-known Comic-Con. So I believe that's how that story passed around. So before we go into the correct story, do you want to jump in here, Dave, with any of your experiences? Because you actually bought yours when we still didn't have the real story.
So do you think that I bought mine prior to the surfacing of this card on the Pokegym, in the card that was not in great condition and whatever? Or would I have bought mine after that, to your recollection?
You bought yours after this picture was posted on Pokegym, but you bought them before we knew the correct story on where they came from.
Okay,
You
so
bought
I
yours
still
in
don't really.
2011. World's
Okay,
2011 was where you got yours.
okay. So yeah, I'm curious. So I remember what the story that was told to me. Why don't you? I'll just mention it, and you can vet accordingly, because my recollection is not very good, which is why basically why you're still on payroll, Dan.
Yeah.
Because mentally you are 3/4 of whatever brain power I still have. So I recall somebody saying that these were sort of like a gift for larger distributors, to try to say, thanks for your support, etc. So that's about all I recall. I do not know what a larger distributor was meant to be, who that would have entailed. And I'm not actually sure that these could have been a gift that was actually given out, or they may have actually been a gift that was intended but was never given out, in particular because of the time frame that you're identifying being so far after the actual stamping of the cards.
Well, when you actually bought yours, there'd been no mention of distributors yet. When you bought yours, because I was there right up until the purchase happened, it was still talk of vendors and Comic Cons. There was still that discussion there, and you purchased yours in 2011 at Worlds. You bought your full set of 3, and it was early the next year in 2012 when it got brought up again on Pokegym. At this point, I'd written about them on Pokegym, I think, and on other forums, so people knew all 3 of them were out there. And some people in the thread, myself included, we talked about this Comic-Con story. And then that's when a post, which I've got the post here, I'm going to read it verbatim, because I want to make sure I get this exactly right. This was posted into that thread by a member of TPCI. I'm not going to say their name, but you can actually go on Pokegym and check this yourself. The cards in question here were all promotional cards given by TPCI Corporate to its distribution partners at the yearly distributor meetings. The foil logo indicates the place and year of the meeting. It has nothing to do with a convention. I cannot comment on how many of each card was produced, but the distribution of those cards was limited. So when we're talking about higher up distributors, we're talking about the small number of companies that will oversee the territories around the world. So most likely these distribution meetings include one or two companies from North America, one or two companies from Europe, probably one company from South America. So a very small number of these would have been handed out at these annual meetings to the heads of these distribution companies. We know slightly more actually than we do now. This is a bit we've never actually spoke about publicly. I visited you late last year in November. We made a couple of videos. We did that because we had some visitors. And I'm not going to reel too much about the visitors just yet, because there is a video coming from their end. But one of the visitors we had was very, very interested in seeing these distributor promos, because we were talking about some of the rarest stuff in your collection, and we offhandedly mentioned them because, you know, they're cool, but they're niche. Not that many people are interested in them. But he was super interested in these because a friend of his in Europe was one of these heads of a distribution company and had the Turtwig from 2008, because he was the person who was high enough up in the distribution company at that point to go to this meeting in New York and got the Turtwig. So it was interesting seeing it from the perspective of someone who hadn't been involved in the Poke Gym at that time, hadn't been involved in all of the drama videos that have come out since with people declaring them fake. And fun fact, if you go to that thread on Poke Gym where that TPCI professor confirmed, or TPCI employee, sorry, confirmed their existence, you'll see some familiar names in there of people talking about how there were thousands. And those same people might be the same people now saying they're fake because they haven't got them yet. It's good to know. Good to always check up on that kind of stuff. So it was fun to see someone who had no knowledge of any of that stuff happening, but still knew of the card because a friend of his had actually gotten one, so he'd seen one of them in person before.
He messaged me today, Dan. I didn't tell you that, but he actually messaged me today once he saw my post, and he said, "You know what? I may be interested in these, ones you're showing out there, possibly in buying one." I couldn't remember when he was here, what he had, said he owned or not. So,
Yeah.
so you'll clarify that for me again, depending. But yeah, and he also said that potentially the video on us and the collection could possibly be coming out within the next month or so. So we'll
Fingers
keep our
crossed,
fingers
because
crossed. Yeah,
it
I
has
know
been a
it's
while since we filmed that
been
one.
a long
Yeah,
time. They're trying to do it up right. So.
yeah. Well, I remember he didn't actually own any of them himself. He was just really
Okay.
interested in seeing them because his friend had that one. And one thing he said was, from talks with his friend, he said that his friend obviously went to the one in New York. Other people from his friend's company had, I believe, been to the San Diego and the Chicago one. And so he'd said there was no one person was ever given a set of three, because there was no distribution company that sent the same person for each of the 3 years.
Dan, when we first, when you were there, when I first acquired the three, or when I acquired the three that I got originally, do you remember? I remember something about there was supposedly like about six of each in existence. That's kind of what the number is that I recall hearing. We know numbers are never perfect these days, but
Sure.
this card, somebody actually was talking to me about these cards versus the trophy cards today. And they said, "Are you telling me this card might be more rare than a trophy card?" And I said, "You know what? In some instances, it is potentially possible." I said, because not necessarily in numbers alone, but you don't see these cards come up very often at auction and eBay on anything. They are very rarely out there. Whereas the trophy cards, they do come up every once in a while. So, what do you think about it, the rarity of these? And if you just had to speculate, complete speculation on the number of these being roughly potentially of about six of each of them in existence or so.
Well, so the number we were told at the time was 6, but like I say, that was when we were still being told they were related to Comic Con. So obviously that story and that information can't 100% be trusted. Based on what we know of the distribution partners around the world, and like I said, one or two from each territory, it's likely that that number 6 does link to how many people are actually at this meeting, but as we know, that probably doesn't correlate exactly to how many were actually made, how many are actually out there. If they had to make 6 copies for a meeting, they probably made minimum 12, probably 18, 24 copies. One, just to make sure that none arrive damaged, but also there are people like at TPCI back then, back before all the huge price rises, it was a case of, when we've talked about backdoor copies and stuff, it's not to do with theft, it's just to do with back before a lot of this stuff wasn't worth anything. TPCI were fine just saying, like, yeah, you want one, just take one. If we have stuff left over, just take it. So if they're having this special stamp made for these 6 people, it's not impossible that people at TPCI were able to just say, yeah, I'd like one as well. Can you just have me one made? Because the cost difference between having 6 made and probably having 100 made is probably completely negligible, because it's just, am I running a sheet through a printer with a couple of rows on a thing, or just running the whole thing through and it's stamping every time? It's probably not too much extra to have it done. Because of the few that we've seen out there, I would imagine actually in circulation there's probably still, I would guess, around 10 to 15 would be where I'd pitch it, as probably what was actually in circulation. If we assume that the ones that have sold are more likely backdoor copies rather than actual ones given at the meeting, with the exception of that badly damaged Piplup, just because the heads of the distribution probably aren't the kind of people who are in touch enough with the buying, selling side of Pokemon to, anytime up from like 2007 up to 2019, to know that that's a valuable thing. Maybe now that Pokemon's way up, if they've seen it, they might remember it's something they've had in their closet from when they used to work at a distribution company, whatever. But I would think that 10 to 15 would be my guess on how many copies of each are out there.
Yeah, I think it's important to distinguish between, I know you do these lengthy discussions on, how many are actually printed versus distributed, because we worry about things getting damaged, et cetera. And printing presses are only so effective when you print off a whole sheet or whatever. But, it is important to really acknowledge that it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the actual amount that are out there based on what is printed. If you don't know if people are doing the right thing or doing the wrong thing, or if they've changed what they're doing from the standpoint of just, here's a couple of extras, Mr. Employee of the company, just because you might enjoy them, like you said, especially before they were known to be valuable or anything else. So I always look at the actual, what do we see? What do our eyes actually see? You talk about the pre-release Raichu, and for all of the discussion of how many copies, what was printed, what would be out there. So far, we've seen 2. That's it. So when you talk about the Piplup, Turtwig, and the Munchlaxes, the distributor promos, I don't ever see very many. Like I said, it just feels like and not all the years of trophies or whatever, just some of them, there seems to be more than others. So, again, it's what I see and what I feel, but you just don't see these come up very often. And it's interesting listening to you and having you reference back to the PokeGym forum or whatever, because it does give credence to the cards. When I first was offered the opportunity to buy the 3 that I bought, I had no idea. You trust the people that you're dealing with and you're buying from, especially when they're involved in the hobby, involved in the, whatever the company is doing. But I didn't necessarily know that they were legitimate or not legitimate or whatever. You just trust, because I'm a trusting person. They're like, these cards are extremely rare. Would you like to put them in a collection? So, so Dan, will you talk about that as much as you can? We won't divulge too much, but will you talk about kind of how that meeting went down, just real quick, so our audience can enjoy a couple of quick specifics?
I mean, first, just want to clarify, when you talk about like comparing it to pre-release Raichu and stuff, my thought of 10 to 15 is that's how many of each I think maybe exist outside of the TPCI building. But if we assume that, say, 6 to 8 of those were given out at this distributor meeting, those ones I don't think are circulating. I think those are potentially lost in closets or in drawers or got thrown out by people who don't care about Pokemon. So it is probably it's a much lower number that you might actually see selling. These actually, a couple of these are graded. I think PSA and CGC maybe have 1 or 2 copies total across the 3 cards on their pop reports. So there is at least a little bit of tracing of some copies, but it is very, very small copies.
And just before you go into what I said, as far as talking about the whole scenario, for those that are watching, we do have some people that are really big into building sets and have been in the hobby a long time. Any thoughts from you guys on how many out there and how many you've heard about? And do you agree or disagree with Dan's speculation on the numbers of how many are out floating in the Pokemon universe right now? I'd love to hear anything that you guys think about it. So, all right, Dan, go ahead.
So yeah, for that meeting, it was I will say that obviously one of the people involved was the person who originally posted that damaged Piplup. They were involved, and then there was another middle person who was someone you dealt with. I mean, I know their names. I don't know if you want to say their names. It was a person you dealt with buying a lot of stuff over the years.
Right.
So they were, as I said, they were still giving the story of it being vendors at Comic-Con, and they had got the idea that it was, because I think TPCI had an actual presence at Comic-Con. It wasn't like they sent some stuff to Comic-Con. It was actually a big enough event that they went along and they were running stuff themselves. It's not like, well, I guess I was going to say it's not like the Play Labs now, but the Play Labs at conventions, you do actually get members of TPCI there to help run them. But I think the idea was that it was higher ranking members of TPCI were going to Comic-Con, meeting with some of the higher ups from Comic-Con and handing them out there, which we now know isn't the case. So that's when they sold them to you, that was still the story they were presenting them under. And when we met with them in that hotel room and talked it over, that's still the story that we had at the time.
And the meeting with them and talking it over and the whole opportunity, as you guys have known about me and the collection, is I rarely say no to something that I think is unique and kind of a once at an opportunity situation when I'm not familiar with it, or especially over the years, I really don't turn down very much, and I'm glad I didn't in this case. But Dan, one could surmise that maybe these cards were exactly what we're talking about, cards that were designed, maybe they were printed to eventually go out to some of these distributors, regardless of what the story was at that time. But yet these were kind of folks that worked for the company in some capacity. I'm not saying W-2 employees. I'm saying they did something for the company. And because of that, somehow these cards were made available to them. And now they were looking to profit on them and turn them over to someone like me.
I think you're skating around saying, we think your copies are backdoor copies. And I think that's the case. I don't believe that the copies you have were given out at these actual distributor meetings with the head of these companies. One, because all 3 copies were coming from the same seller, which we know there was no one, like, even if the same company went to all 3, we know just from talks that it wasn't the same person all 3 times. So this would have meant a person had to go out of their way to trade for it or get it. Yours are very, very good condition compared to, the only other one we'd seen at that point was a really heavily damaged Piplup, because, as I say, this is probably something given out to people who don't care about Pokemon that much or don't care about collecting. They just know Pokemon as their business, as the company they work for. So it probably was just thrown on a table and went in a pocket, and then maybe someone found it later, or they put it in like their notebook or something. They didn't keep it mint condition, which yours are. That's also why I think that the few other copies that do move around and sell are more likely also backdoor copies, just because most of the ones that float around are good condition, like better condition than I would expect them to be if they were given out in the manner that we know some copies were given out.
Yeah, that makes sense. And again, I have spoken to some people just over the years who have either had these cards, pass through their hands at one point, or knew about them in the day or didn't. And I think, you're right that most people didn't ever realize or see these things as being worth anything, today down the road. When we were in that room and when I bought those cards, I won't say at the moment what I paid, but it was several $1,000s. And so, I don't, at that time, they were really positioned as being quite rare and something that was not widely available at all. And that has turned out to be true, thank goodness. But it doesn't mean that, like, you said, people that have them are understanding that they really could have something that's valuable if they were actually at a distributor's meeting or something and they still had the card. So,
Yeah.
and so it's really unlikely that a lot of those will surface if they were even kept at all.
I mean, it does remind me of the sample cards, that set of 10 cards with the word sample printed on the bottom. Those were printed to be shown to people at a private event where people could scan them, use the e-reader, see how the e-reader worked. It was like a closed door industry event. And from what we were told, about half the ones that were ever printed were given out at this industry event, and basically every copy from that event ended up in the trash at the end of the day. Almost every copy that's circulating is an extra copy that was kept at TPCI. I know for a fact that mine were, because I bought mine off eBay and I spoke to the person I bought them from, who said to me that they used to work at TPCI, or the Pokemon Company as it was at the time, Pokemon USA actually I think it was at the time, and they said that it was just one of those things they were given and they were allowed to keep, and when they left they took it with them. But they only had one Pikachu, so I was lucky to get the full set, but then they had multiples of each of the others. But those cards, if every copy had been given out at this event, there'd probably be no surviving copies or maybe one surviving set, because people were hole punching them to put them on lanyards so they didn't have to carry them around. Obviously, the idea was swipe them to see how the e-reader works, so all of them would have been getting damaged. It's a similar kind of thing of when you have cards this limited and they're given to people who don't really know or care about the collecting side that much. I say again, today that's probably different because Pokemon's in the news. Everyone knows that Pokemon cards are worth money. This thing probably wouldn't be an issue today, but back then, Pokemon cards weren't in the news. They weren't a big thing. There was no cards selling for tens of thousands of dollars. There was the pre-release Raichu and the Illustrator were like the two cards ever that had sold for 10,000. Like that was the top of what it was, and it wasn't making big waves in the mainstream media. People outside of Pokemon collecting weren't aware of it. So that's how this stuff happened. That's why I think it's different now. If something like this happened now, I think anyone who did get them, if they did another distributor thing or anything where people get them, they will keep them nice and hang on to them because they know they're worth money. I mean, just look at that basketball game, the Rain City Pikachu. There's 20,000 given out, and I bet 15 to 19,000 of them were kept nice because I don't think there were 20,000 Pokemon fans in that stadium, but there were 20,000 people who've read in the papers about cards selling for millions, so they know to keep it nice and they know to put it on eBay.
Dan, it's amazing. I want to end right now because you divulged some secrets, and you sort of always told me you would never tell any of your secrets. Just these last couple of stories about the acquisition of cards by you in ways that you should have never had been privy to those cards. It's amazing. I would recommend, just as a friend, you don't promote this video because I don't think the world should know about all these secrets. And I think the therapy sessions for you are going fantastic. You're beginning to open up, my friend, and I never thought that would happen. I knew that the UK to USA transition would be something that might open you up a little bit. I thought that Laura yelling at you every night because of marital difficulties might add to that just a smidge more. But when you can just come out and you can say, hey, I did these things and I'm not proud of them, but I'm okay with where I'm at today. That's a real accomplishment, my friend. And I want to say from my heart to yours, you're doing the right stuff. Okay. And I don't want to talk about this anymore because part of me feels dirty talking about these distributor promos. Part of me feels like we've taken an entire weight off my chest, my shoulders, not my stomach. The Buddha belly is still there and still enjoying cookies at night. That's all I've got for you, Dan. Do you want to say anything else? Because, man, can you talk?
On this topic, no, I think we're done. Last thing I will say is we should be recording tomorrow. So it's Tuesday as we're recording this. People will be seeing this Wednesday. We should be good to record Wednesday for a video Thursday. Me and Lord then have to go out of state for a couple of days for a long weekend. It's a niece's birthday, so we're out of state. I'll have some other videos going up over the weekend. just to fill the time. But then after tomorrow, Koffee Talks will be back probably Tuesday next week. So
Dan, it's interesting you would say that because I'm always the last to know, and I'm getting tired of it, okay? If this is a true partnership, these secrets, this whole secrets thing with you is really getting on my nerves. It's lucky that I'm clear-headed and I can tell it like it is right now. I'm done. I'm just about done, Dan. I'm not all the way there. I'm partially there. I'm on the way there. I may take an Uber there to get there, but I'm almost there. I'm telling you right now. So my family and I will also be traveling a bit. Don't come to my house. My kids all live here, and I've got alarm systems. Don't think you can do anything in my house. Oh, Uncle Dave's gone. We're gonna go. No, I have important people that stay, and I have live guards monitoring 24/7. But we are gonna go to a basketball tournament. Luke's gonna travel, and we'll go to California for a day or two. So your timing works out great, my friend. But thank you for not telling me at all. I was sad about how I was going to actually divulge to you that I was not going to be available for my mandatory Koffee Talks podcast. So thanks. We're on the same page as
I only realized today that it was this weekend we were going away. I knew we had it coming up, but I only realized today that it was like Thursday night this week that we're traveling.
Dan, is there any chance, my last question for you, would you ever try to fly in and burglarize me just because you know more things than other people?
No, because I know more things than other people. I've seen the defense system on that house.
Okay, fair enough, Dan. You're a good friend. Never change unless you need to change, and then
be shot before I got down the driveway.
Okay, good. Dan, I'm going to put my hand up. You can close us out. It's been wonderful seeing you guys all today. I have a post on Instagram. Go find it, and if you want to DM me for special pricing on one of these extra cards or whatever, let me know. Okay.
Yeah, cool. Go buy some extra cards from David because I can't afford them. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Koffee Talks with Dan Norton and David Person, with music by More Than Never and artwork by Lore Norton. A special thanks to all our Patreon members. Join us again next time.
But they don't want you to